were cold, they bit my skin. Fights I lost, but never gave in.
CDCR, California Department of Corrections. R is for rehabilitation. So Arnold Schwarzenegger put that in when he was governor. Before that, it was just the CDC, California Department of Corrections, because that's all they doing is punishing. California punishes. So anyway, I was one of the punishees. I spent over 20 years in the California prison system. I've been through level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4, and then back down to level 3, and ended up walking out the door. I'm one of the lucky ones. I survived. And that, you know what I'm saying, took some doing. There was situations where I had to fight for my life. There were situations where I had to fight for my manhood. There were situations where, I just had to fight. And luckily I came prepared. Uh, I grew up a little different than most and had a little more, a little more attention when I was young. And, that helped me out later on. Because, when I went to prison, I had already been fighting most of my life. I've been in and out of juvenile facilities since I was 9 years old. I've been, you know, uh, father used to put hands on me until I got big enough to where I knocked him out one time. After that, he went and got his gun, and it was time to go. So now here I am, 13 years old, out on the streets. Where am I going to go? One thing led to another. Next thing you know what I'm saying, the homeboy, you know what I'm saying, got a dope house. I'm hanging out talking to him, and he's like, yeah, you can stay here. You just got to sell this for me. So before you know it, you know what I'm saying, I had a place to lay my head. I also had a job. But you know what I'm saying, he wasn't just using me. He could have just took advantage of me. I was a 13-year-old kid. I didn't know nothing. I didn't know, you know what I'm saying, how things went. You know what I mean? I'm a little kid. I'm naive. So, but he's giving me game and, you know what I'm saying, educating me at the same time. He's paying because I sell his dope, but then there's my cut. And I have to sell his first. Once I sell his, then I can sell mine. So I'm selling, and every time, you know what I'm saying, I sell out, and then I just put my money aside and put my money aside because when he's around, he's taking care of food and everything else. The electricity cable, you know what I'm saying, all that is on in the spot. So, I mean, I just got to take care, when people come and take care of business. So it worked out, and by the time I was 14, he had laced me up tight enough to where I went and got my own apartment. And man, we thought we were high tech. We had police scanners and all kinds of stuff. We thought we were above the law. We was watching, what was that, Miami Vice? But we were small time crack peddlers, you know what I mean? But this was the 80s. So, anybody that knows San Diego in the 80s was cracking, especially if you was in Southeast San Diego. And that's it. That was home. I confined myself to the hood, to my neighborhood. I confined myself to the hood because that's where I was known. That's where I was comfortable. That's where, oh yeah, you know what I'm saying, yeah, people knew, you know what I'm saying, but when I leave up out of there, it's like, who the hell, you know, and it's a hard, it's a hard way to find out when you catch me at the wrong time. But all that being said, the California prison system is still gobbling people up. It's it's sad because, you know what I'm saying, I think about all the time I spent over 20 years, locked in a cage. I'm talking about in a cell. I lived in a bathroom. My cell was as big as the bathroom I have in my house today. And everything, I did everything in there. I slept, I ate, you know what I'm saying, I bird bathed, you know what I'm saying, everything, you work out, you do, I spent a lot of time in the hole, in lockup and solitary and it wasn't, I didn't choose. Most of it I chose, but a lot of it, it was situations where other people, you know what I'm saying, I had hits out on me. So I walked the line, you know what I'm saying, with people, you know what I'm saying, wanting to take my life. And, you know what I'm saying, I didn't back down. I had an open invitation to anybody that wanted some, you can get some one on one. Ain't nobody else got to be involved. I don't run from nobody. I ain't hard to find, and I don't hide behind my homeboys. But best believe I got some homeboys. You know what I mean? I never expected, when I first went to prison, I was told by one of my big homies, you know what I'm saying? My big homie Guy, I love you, Guy. But Guy, he laced me up and he told me, don't count on nobody to have your back. Because when it comes crunch time and you're counting on somebody to have your back, that's when you end up with something in your back. So always think that you're on your own. Don't never take for granted that somebody got your back. And I took that literally. I used that. That stuck with me, you know what I'm saying, through, fights, stabbings, you know what I'm saying, cell extractions, and you know what I'm saying, uh beat downs by the goon squad. You know what I'm saying, I'm lucky to be alive. I've seen people die. I've seen people die. And it wasn't, I don't want to live like that no more. So I knew I had to do something different. I got out and I did something different. I got into a drug program. I got a job. I knew, you know what I'm saying, I had to do something different. I had no family left. I paroled, you know what I'm saying, from the hole in Soledad after doing 12 years, 7 months straight. Before that, I did 3 years straight. So, you know what I'm saying, it's like I just did like 15 years because I was only out for 7 months of my 20s. That's it. And they say the 20s is supposed to be the best part of your life. Well, I was fighting for my life in my 20s. And if people know what I'm talking about, if you know anything about the California prison system, I was in the California prison system in the 90s, the early 90s. I came in 91. And you know what I'm saying? I had an H number. And I went through, you know what I'm saying? I started out level 1 and I went from Donovan Reception to Jamestown, way up north, way up in the Sierra Mountains. We drove way, I'm talking about, it was a whole day. We left, it was still dark when we left the prison in San Diego, Donovan, and we rode the bus. We was shackled up, so, you know what I mean, But you know what I'm saying, that's when I learned you don't mess with the transportation police, because the transportation police, they're different than the regular correctional officers in prison. Transportation police, they'll do something to you. Yeah, they'll do something to you, but they'll make your stuff disappear too. And that, you know what I'm saying, I've known people, you know what I'm saying, that ran their mouth, that was on the bus with me, and they property never made it. That's the thing. You got to know when to run your mouth and when to shut the hell up. But you learn from mistakes. And believe me, I learned from mistakes. I had to learn these lessons the hard way. But, you know what I'm saying, seeing this, I knew what was going down. And I knew, you know what I'm saying, they said, you know what I'm saying, stop talking. And this dude kept talking. And then, you know what I'm saying, they told him to stop talking again. And then they said, look, if I have to pull this bus over, that was that, when you was a little kid with your, I don't know, you had siblings. I had a sister, older sister. So we be in the back of the car, mom's and dad in the front seat. And, you know what I'm saying, we back here going at it. And Pops, boy, don't make me pull this car over. So when the correctional officer gets on the PA system and tells the one guy to stop talking or I'm going to pull this bus over, he kept talking. It was comedy. It was comedy for everybody in the back until they came and they pulled the bus over on the side of the freeway, on the 15 freeway near near the 76. Not all the way to the 76, but near the 76. They pulled the bus over on the freeway. They came in the back and they pull. Now there's a guard in the back in a little booth that we can't get to him, but that's the gun tower for the bus. He has the gun back there and he can blow you away from right there and you can't do nothing to him. So we're in the bus and they came to two other officers, that one that was driving and one that was, you know what I'm saying, securing the bus. They came and opened up the cages and came into the back and got the loudmouth that was, you know what I'm saying, cracking jokes. It was funny until they dragged him up to the front of the bus. And when they got him up there, all you heard was oohs and ahs because, you know what I'm saying, they was giving it to him. When they came back, one cop was holding his ankle chains. The other cop was holding his cuffs, and they were dragging him along the floor because your arms can only lift up so high in those cuffs. He's screaming the whole time. And they drag him all the way back, and then they, you know what I'm saying, you know, they put him in his seat. Really, really rough. And then they tell him, if we hear anything else out of you, we're coming back here again. And he didn't make another sound except when we hit a big pothole or bump. Because, you know what I'm saying, he was beat. He was beat. But that's the thing, you know, California Department of Corrections, they got some staff that'll do some bad things to you. And this was back in the 90s. So, you know, you got to know, you know what I'm saying, you know, that was nothing. That was nothing. This is just one of the things that I've seen. Anyway, look, I just wanted to tap in. Y'all hit that like, subscribe, share. Check out the channel. I got more videos on there. I got a bunch of older videos, you know what I'm saying, with some good stories. So check them out. Thanks for watching.